And this time we'll have our wisdom story.
The story this morning is There's No Such Thing as a Dragon by Jack Kent. Billy Bixby was surprised when they woke up one morning and found a dragon in their room. It was a small dragon about the size of a kitten. The dragon waggled its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell their mother. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Billy's mother, and she seemed to really mean it. Billy went back to their room and began to get dressed. The dragon came close to Billy and waggled its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. No, if there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on its head. Billy washed their face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Billy sat down at the table. The dragon sat down on the table. Now, this sort of thing was not usually permitted, but there wasn't much Billy's mother could do about it. She had already said there's no such thing as a dragon, and if there's no such thing as something, you can't very well tell it to get down off the table. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate those too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter. Billy only got one of them, but they said that's all they really wanted anyway. It was okay. Billy went upstairs to brush their teeth. Mother started cleaning the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by this time, made itself comfortable on the hallway rug and went to sleep. By the time Billy came back downstairs, the dragon had grown so much it filled the hallway. Billy had to go around by way of the living room to get to where their mother was. I didn't know dragons grew so fast, said Billy. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Mother firmly. Mother spent all day going back and forth between the computer on her desk and the kitchen while Billy played. She told herself that she went the long way around through the den for the exercise. That was why. After lunch, Mother started going out the kitchen window and back in the room with her computer, since the dragon blocked all the doors in the hallway. Yeah. She told herself it was for the fresh air, since there was no such thing as a dragon. By mid-afternoon, the dragon filled the entire house. Its head hung out the front door and down the steps. Its tail hung out the back door. There was not a room in the house that did not have a piece of a dragon in it. The dragon snored softly for a dragon, but the whole house vibrated every time it took a breath. When the dragon woke up from its nap, it was hungry. The bakery truck went by. The smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist, and so the dragon ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like a snail on a shell on a snail, or a house on a dragon. The mail carrier was just coming up the path with some mail for the Bixbys when their house rushed past them and headed down the street. He chased the Bixby's house for a few blocks, but he couldn't catch it. People came out of their houses as the house and then the mail carrier went by. They thought maybe it was one of those surprise parades people have nowadays with the outside, oh, look, it's a parade, Ariel. Yeah, no, just a house and a dragon. When Mr. Bixby came home after his long day at work, the first thing he noticed was that his house was missing. Yeah. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to call from the porch to tell him which way the house had gone. Mr. Bixby got on his bike and he started looking for the house. He studied all the houses up and down the street as he went along. Finally, he saw one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby waved to him from an upstairs window. Mr. Bixby climbed up onto the dragon's nose, along his head, up its neck, and onto the porch roof. Mr. Bixby went into the house through that upstairs window, and he used his "I am quite angry, but being calm" dad voice And he said, "How did this happen?" "It was the dragon," said Billy. "There's no such thing." Billy interrupted their mother. "There is a dragon," Billy insisted, "a very big dragon." And Billy patted the dragon on its head. And the dragon waggled its tail happily. And then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller until soon it was kitten-sized again. "Oh, oh, mine dragon's this size," said Mother. "Why do you have to grow to be so big?" "I'm not sure," said Billy, "but I think it just needed to be noticed." Thanks for listening to my story today.
So our reading this morning is entitled For Nothing is Fixed by James Baldwin. For nothing is fixed, forever and forever and forever it is not fixed. The earth is always shifting, the light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out.
Oh gosh, it is such a blessing to be back among you. This morning, I'm going to talk about preemptive radical inclusion, which really, it's pretty simple. Those of us who hold any kind of leadership, which I understand to be all of us in different ways and at different times, we have the responsibility to learn, grow, and to preemptively create radical changes that will include all people in our collective movement towards equity, justice, and liberation. We choose to all get free together. Now, an example of what I mean by preemptive might mean putting access ramps in buildings where there were previously stairs. We don't wait until we know someone needs it before we build it. Physical accessibility and universal design can simply be part of how we do business. In the process, those of us who use wheels to get around will experience more justice and equity in our ability to move through the world, and others of us find out that we'd really rather not take the stairs so often. But, I'm getting ahead of myself. Last time I was here, and I should probably note two things. If you missed it, I think it's on your YouTube channel for another couple of weeks. And also, I do want you to get your money's worth. So get comfortable in your chairs. Last time I was here, I mentioned that I come from 400 years of Puritan and other subtler English and Scottish New Englanders. We come from people with names like Harbottle Grimscott. People who cling to offensively radical individualism, survival of the fittest, and the absolute assuredness that our way is the only way. Puritans weren't big on feelings or words for feelings. Do you remember mine? I had the three as I was growing up: mad, sad, and what was the other one again? Oh yeah, mad. Puritans weren't good at noticing feelings, not their own nor other people's. And those of us who come from Puritan roots, and those of us who come from the more theoretically generic white people individualistic and perfectionist culture, and those of us who might not come from it, but nonetheless swim in those waters, well, it's a really tough time to be us. What with our individualism and not many feeling words in a world that is devastated, hurt, violent, and full of swarming totalitarianism where there was once democracy. Individualism and not many feeling words. It's not doing us a favor right now. Mad, sad, and what was the other one? Will you take a breath with me? I was raised on a farm. So my roots were not just Puritan, but I was raised and socialized with cows in this strong belief in productivity, American exceptionalism, and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I was raised to think carefully and logically about something. If our old Ford tractor wouldn't start back in the day, it had to be a problem with fuel, fire, or air. I was told, to know how to think and to believe that there really was just the one way to approach things. And since I was good at it, the thinking, I would, of course, be right. Those of us descended from settler colonialists, those of us who have been part of the structures of the erstwhile democracy that those colonialists set up, we live in a system designed to benefit us first and foremost. Designed so that the system itself will make sense to us. So many of us were raised to believe our thoughts and our own ideas so much that we don't always notice when we're having an idea instead of remembering a fact. We have a thought and tend to assume oftentimes that it is true. Now, it's not uncomplicated. For some of us, we're held to the standard and simultaneously told, perhaps because we were queer or we were a girl or we were whatever, that we didn't know anything. This is not uncomplicated because it's hard to be a person. But so many of us and so much of the time believe our own thoughts and believe that our personal experience is normative. Now, in my own life, relying on my particular assessment, raised to know all the right things as I was, it's led me to some unfortunate circumstances. When I went to seminary in the late 1980s, as a young adult, I was still very confident that I knew so much. So much! Oh, they're so lucky to have me, honestly. It was in seminary where I first experienced someone who told me they were allergic to gluten. I responded, gluten? Who's allergic to gluten? Humans have been eating wheat as a basic staple for thousands of years. People aren't allergic to staples. This tone of voice and this look on my face, that's disbelieving contempt. But I still didn't know my feeling words, and I only had the couple, and I was pretty sure that only other people were ever contemptuous. I was not able to be present with people and offer them the authenticity of their own lives. Then, because wait, there's more. When someone kept asking us not to wear perfume because she was allergic to scents. There goes the face again. How could you be allergic to scents? Smell is just smelling. No one's allergic to smelling. People have been smelling for thousands of years, and that's it. I didn't have enough knowledge then to understand that the smell of something is just a chemical compound ingested through the nose. And if someone is sensitive to a chemical, it can get in through the nose as easily as if one ate it. I didn't have enough knowledge then to understand. And, oh my goodness, and I couldn't simply believe them. I substituted my personal experience of no sensitivity to perfume for this woman's lived experience where she was asking for our help and support. My own experience trumped hers to the extent that I mocked her. Subsequently, and possibly as proof of a deity whose exists solely to provide me with awkward learning opportunities, I have become a person with celiac disease who can't eat even microscopic bits of gluten because the smallest, tiniest bits make my immune system attack it, and my body, let's just say, freaks out. But wait, there's still more. Yes, I am also now a person who is incredibly sensitive to petroleum products and chemical compounds and flowers and grass and trees. Well, pretty much nature. Yeah, lots of things that have been around for thousands of years. So it's important for me to note this because I've been this person, the person who uses my own reality to judge others. And I called it at the beginning of this, I called it unfortunate. And I can find some humor in it now as a cautionary tale, but the reality is that my attitude and behavior was really harmful. I hurt people. I had to learn to believe people when they told me about an experience that I do not share. Just as I have had to learn to believe the emerging consensus of a group when they share their life experience in this country that was missing from the schooling and media of my upbringing. And it meant that I had to learn not to automatically believe my own thoughts. Because I could only think within the framework that I had been taught, right? I had to learn to differentiate ideas from truths and hypotheses from facts and myth from reality. In a sudden surprise moment, my first thought is often what I was taught the earliest in my life. I told you last time that as a child, I was considered a failed girl, a tomboy. And as an adult, it took a long time to find language for my gender, and I went through all kinds of different attempts. But finally, and for a long time, they added up to, I'm a tomboy, farm girl, masculine of center, butch, queer, womanish type person. Well, thank goodness for people exploring gender and language, and now I can simply say that I'm non-binary, not a man, not a woman. And still, I make mistakes sometimes because change is hard and neural pathways are a thing, right? When today's story was written in 1975, Billy Bixby's pronoun was he, but a couple of years ago, Billy let me know that it's they now. Yeah, and I don't always remember when I tell the story. Sometimes I misgender Billy, and it's really harmful. It seems like just a little insult, but even when it's unintended, the harm is cumulative. It might be sentence after sentence, hour after hour, like hearing someone call them Janice instead of Billy. And then so often folks will keep doing it over and over. My responsibility as a human, as a Unitarian Universalist, is to believe Billy when they tell me who they are, and when I make a mistake, correct it. And honestly, practice in private so that I don't cause more harm. But we live in a world where not everyone corrects themselves or notices when they use the wrong pronoun for a person. Some people deny my and Billy's experience. All too often people say, non-binary? That's not a thing. I've never heard of it. Can't imagine it. No one's non-binary. There have been women and men for thousands of years, and that's it. Where I need people to believe me, to accept my experience and the emerging consensus among gender nonconforming people in the West that there are more than two genders, which we know because of our experience, and the truth of which many other cultures have accepted for thousands of years. People instead, all too often, substitute their personal judgment and experience. Or maybe they believe it's a thing, but not one that's important. Just a little bit of gluten, just the fragrance in my hairspray, but I won't put on perfume. Just a little bit of misgendering. So I've been the person who doesn't believe someone else's experience and substitutes my thoughts And I am also a person who other people don't believe my experience. Now, I don't have to bear shame over when I make these mistakes and have to learn, but because when we know better, we do better. But I do need to be intentional about learning to know and do better. And that's why it's preemptive. I don't have to wait until I hurt somebody to figure out some of the things that hurt people. And let's be really clear, in this time, the United States president claimed this week that me and my trans kin are terrorists. People who are still arguing about whether or not my pronouns make sense to them are not bearing witness to, supporting, or defending my life. Right? At this point, we need to have been there, done that. At this point, it's time for anyone who still has to challenge pronouns in their head or refuse to try to change them when asked to just go ahead and put pronouns in the same category as why airplanes fly. Yep. There's something I don't understand, but I just accept that it's real and that it matters. For me, for us, to be preemptively and radically inclusive of people, I must recognize that they experience their lives and their circumstances in society in ways that I could not. Not just in ways that I don't, but in ways that I couldn't. I will never know what it is to be a young Black man pulled over by the police. I can't, air quotes, walk a mile in his shoes. It's not humanly possible. What I can do, though, is believe him when he tells me what it's like. So I've made the idea, don't believe everything you think, part of my perspective. It means that I must notice when my assumptions and other people's statements don't match up. Now, the noticing that's not hard. I notice that a lot. The hard part is that I have to lean into the discomfort of the possibility that it is I who is wrong. My inclination is so often to reach first, to make them prove it. Prove your experience. But no, I must turn that around and reach first into myself to explore, why am I so certain about someone else's life? This is most especially true when I apply this first and foremost to circumstances where my privilege might be what keeps me from perceiving what someone else has told me. It's a remarkably humbling practice if I'm doing it right. Preemptive radical inclusion means that we must preemptively seek the emerging consensus of people and groups who are marginalized and oppressed in ways that we're not, so that we can prepare ourselves to be radically inclusive. It's compassionate to bear witness rather than to practice assessment and judgment all the time, even if assessment and judgment give us better dopamine hits. In this way, we who are cisgender can learn about the oppression of trans people by listening to trans people. We who are white can learn about how people of color are marginalized and oppressed by listening, reading, and reflecting, and regularly checking our thoughts. We UUs have done this collectively when we sought out the emerging consensus and engaged the white supremacy teach-in those years ago, or widening the circle of concern, or beloved conversations, and so much more. But collectively engaging the ideas and experiences in the UUA's Common Read each year. Well, now the stakes are even higher. And all of those things that we do so that we gain more understanding, we have to keep doing that, but we also must choose to follow the lead of activists who are practiced in opposition to harmful governmental systems, instead of just trying to learn a little bit and then make something up and try it out. Because it's not one book or two workshops, but a series of choices that we make about learning so much of what was kept from us in our previous or formal learning. And meanwhile, following the lead of those most impacted. We might choose to listen to podcasts and watch documentaries about fighting fascism or oppression instead of choosing another repeat of our favorite soothing British mystery cooking show or the excitement of a sports ball game. We might join recovery groups that help us to heal from past injuries or the patterns that we developed to cope with those injuries. We individually and collectively make decisions to increase our ability to create equity, inclusion, and justice in a country that has made those words pretty darn illegal. Now, some of us have made it this far in our lives believing in pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. It feels to us like we did all right, and we did it ourselves. Some of us only noticed for the first time at the beginning of the pandemic what it was like to discover if the boots were more fragile than we know, or someone had made it impossible for us to have or use the straps. That was a stretchy metaphor, but I bet you followed it. Some of us have learned that radical individualism is a myth created and supported by a community of radical individualists who helped one another. Maybe we remember that those Puritans built their structures together, and they were taught how to farm on North American soil by indigenous people who willingly shared what they knew, not understanding that the Puritans and other Europeans were taking, not sharing, the land. Maybe we remember that women fed Henry David Thoreau dinner every night and did his laundry while he was off in his woods, and he came home to do chores. Or that Jack Kerouac came home to his mom for months at a time so she could nurse him back to health after his adventures. Radical individualism is a lie, invented and perpetuated by a culture that's designed for patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism. And so many of us have bought into or been tricked by the ways these systems lead us to deny ourselves even, and certainly one another, in the service of power and money. And in the process, it's often in ways that we might not even notice. In our current political and social situation, being inclusive is taking on a whole new frame. We can't simply talk about welcoming someone at the door with a smile or restructuring our language to include people of other genders. The federal government can take the word inclusion off of all the federal websites and say that it is forbidden, but we're not the government. We are Unitarian Universalists, and we will do what's right. Preemptive radical inclusion means that it is a faith commitment to constantly work to increase our capacity to ensure that everyone's needs are met, even in this time especially, as those needs are changing. We do this even as those needs are under assault from those who would deny the human rights to some people. Authorities who ban the full range of reproductive health treatment, who take down web pages about Black leaders and forbid teaching complete American history at West Point, and then fire generals and other top brass who are Black or women or both. Those who deny the full range of medical care to pregnant and trans people and gut the parts of government that are supposed to help us. They fired the people who knew the most about bird flu and COVID, and they appointed that man to run it all. They closed Social Security offices and truncated FEMA. These things are not to help us. Sending the military to cities, curiously enough, democratic cities, it's not to help us. So much of what is happening now flies in the face of justice. But we didn't get here in a day or a week or even since November. It's all very tricky. The ideas that get stated often echo what many of us were taught earliest in our life. It can be easy to sort of slide into thinking that something or some part of something, well, it makes a little sense, or that's worth thinking about some more. The example that I will use is trans healthcare bans. Trans healthcare bans were first sold to us by saying, well, we're only banning it for children because we just don't know enough. Trans healthcare has been happening for 100 years. Hormone replacement therapy is not new. And it's been used on young people for gender affirming care for decades. And when I say that, what I mean is young men, young cisgender men who are born with a condition that means they don't get enough testosterone for them to develop the way their peers are. They're given testosterone. For decades, we have been treating people the same way. But the myth is, oh, the children. And then the next thing that happens, well, we are going to limit healthcare for trans people if they're adults on public assistance or Medicare or in the military. Just some, because we don't want to pay for it. That slippery slope happens and is successful because we sometimes fail to listen to the people who actually know. And so good people bought into the idea that there was only a little dip into freedom and it would stop there. It didn't. None of it has stopped there. If we have only learned about oppression as observers, not as witnesses and allies, we can accidentally make things worse. Just like we have to check everything out on the internet, we have to check everything out that we think. Because we have to check if our thoughts, our beliefs masquerading as fact. If that first thing that popped into my mind was what my Nana taught me in 1972, and my Nana was not a good person. We have to notice if words about truth, justice, and the American way that come out of our mouth echo what we were taught in elementary school. Day after day, we choose to practice learning new things, to practice new ways of speaking and acting, because as we do, we bend the moral and material arc of the universe towards justice. It can be embarrassing. It can feel awful when we find out that we've been so wrong about something for so long. And the antidote for that shame, for that embarrassment, for that discomfort of having someone point out that we're wrong about something, the antidote for that is to realize that when we can put down that false fact, we put down the false fact, and that hand becomes available to us to bend the moral and material arc of the universe further towards justice. The time right now is for us to practice reaching out to one another in new ways. Totalitarianism breeds fear and separation. We must offer and accept help from one another in different ways than we used to. We can stick up for one another, and we can live into the reality that all of us actually means all of us, even when someone else is telling us it's not. We fight oppression as we dive deeper into being beloved community for one another and for those around us in our community. And we can do this because that's who we are, Unitarian Universalists. We are people who can choose to act preemptively to make the world a better place. We will do it imperfectly, but we will do it within covenant and with commitment. We can choose to learn what we need to create an inclusion that moves us closer to justice, to live beloved community together in a way that empowers us to protect those most vulnerable, which includes us oftentimes, and to protect democracy itself. We can choose to all get free together and not sacrifice people on the slippery slide of maybe they'll stop there. Will you join me in this? I'd love to hear you answer. Will you join me in this? Thank you.